My ex is part of my life, and if you want to be with me, accept it or leave, my fiancé said at our engagement party in front of everyone. I said, then it's a pass, walked out, and a week later, her family lost everything. Hey, Reddit! I never thought I'd be the guy writing one of these, but here we are. My ex and her family tried to turn my engagement party into a therapy session, and I walked out instead. What happened next completely changed my life. But before all that, let me start from the beginning. My name's Rowan Vale, I'm 32, and I design buildings for a living. I guess that means I spend a lot of time thinking about structure, where things should go, how much weight they can hold, what happens when something shifts. It's not just work to me. I like the calm that comes with neat lines and clear plans. The world makes more sense that way. People, though, don't come with blueprints. That's what I was doing when I met Elena Quinn, or technically a few weeks before I met her. My friend Callie had been telling me I needed to get out and meet real people, so I let her drag me to a gallery opening. Elena stood out the moment I saw her. Bright red dress, quick hands, talking like the room belonged to her. She caught me studying a sculpture and joked, "That piece looks like it's about to argue with you." I laughed, and that was how it started. She was sharp, funny, confident without trying. When she learned I was an architect, she teased, "So you're one of those people who actually finish things." I like that. She made conversation easy. We started seeing each other often. She worked in marketing, always busy, always chasing something new. Her energy made everything feel alive, even ordinary days. About a month in, she mentioned getting coffee with Julian, an old friend. Only later did she add, "We dated for a few years, but it's ancient history." I played it cool, and she smiled. "We're just friends. We're adults, right?" she said. Still, the way she said we sounded like she meant her and Julian, not her and me. Julian's name kept coming up here and there. A text, a call, a story from back in the day. I told myself it was harmless, and maybe it was. At least, at first. A few months later, Elena took me to meet her parents, Marcus and Evelyn. Their house was full of plants, art, and psychology books. Both were retired therapists. Marcus still took the occasional consult. Dinner had the feel of a session more than a meal, and Elena seemed proud of it. My parents were the opposite. Married 40 years, private and steady. When I told them about the Quinns, my dad just laughed, "Sounds like a lot of words for dinner." And my mom warned, "Don't start thinking being uncomfortable is normal." A few months later, I proposed. It was quiet, just us on the couch, half watching a show. She said yes through tears, and for a moment I felt relief. We spent the night calling people. Her friends flooded her phone with hearts. Mine sent short texts. Then one from Julian popped up. "Knew it would happen. Congrats, you two." Ian, she smiled, replied, "Thanks," and turned the phone face down. The next weekend, her parents celebrated with a toast about commitment being the ultimate therapy. Evelyn praised me for being calm enough to balance Elena, but not so rigid he tries to fix her. Every compliment felt like a test. Later, cleaning up, I asked if they always analyzed people. She said, "They can't help it." That night, lying in bed, I kept hearing Marcus's voice turning everything into diagnoses. And underneath it, Julian's name, like background noise I couldn't ignore. I told myself to stop overthinking, but part of me wondered if I was looking at a design that seemed solid on paper, but was already starting to crack. A few weeks after the engagement, Elena invited me to her parents' place again for dinner. She said they wanted to talk about plans. Nothing serious, just a family catch-up. I should have known that meant something entirely different in their world. When I got there, Marcus and Evelyn had already set the table like it was an interview. The lights were dim, soft music in the background, and both of them had notebooks on the counter. Marcus said it was for jotting down ideas for the wedding theme, but I wasn't convinced. We started with small talk about work. Marcus asked how my projects were going, and when I said I'd been busy but happy, he said, "You sound like someone who uses work as a way to control uncertainty." Evelyn nodded like she was grading his observation. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. Then the conversation turned to Elena's family philosophy, which was apparently built around radical openness. Evelyn said, "In this family, we believe that every relationship adds something valuable. We don't cut people out just because labels change." She looked straight at me when she said it. I knew what she meant, and she knew I knew. I kept my tone light. That's a good way to see things, as long as everyone's comfortable. Marcus smiled in that calm therapist way. Comfort is often resistance, Rowan. You might want to ask yourself what makes you uncomfortable about inclusion. I felt like I was being coached in front of a live audience. I said I didn't think inclusion should mean ignoring boundaries. Elena didn't say much. She just listened. her hand resting lightly on my arm, like she was saying, "Don't take it personally. They do this with everyone." When we left later that night, Elena said, "You were quiet. Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just a long day." She nodded, clearly not buying it but not pushing either. That weekend, I went to see my parents. Their house always felt steady. Small porch, mismatched chairs, the same curtains from my childhood. My mom cooked a simple dinner: roast chicken, potatoes, green beans. No music, no analysis, no one talking like a therapist. Dad asked about the wedding plans, and I said things were moving along, mostly thanks to Elena's family. He nodded and said, "Good. Just remember, you're part of that too." After dinner, Mom and I sat on the back porch while Dad cleaned up. The air smelled like grass and laundry detergent. I told her about the dinner with the Quins, how they talked like everything I said was some deep confession. She smiled, that knowing kind of smile she gets when she's about to say something that'll stick. "You don't have to fight every comment," she said. "Just remember, love shouldn't make you feel unreasonable for wanting respect." I nodded. I didn't know if I was looking for her approval or permission, but I felt lighter hearing her say it. Later that night, back home, I tried to bring up one specific thing with Elena. I figured if I was calm and clear, maybe we'd find some middle ground. We were sitting on the couch. She was scrolling through her phone, half watching a show. I said, "Hey, can we talk about something small?" She glanced over. "Sure. It's about Julian," I said carefully. "I don't mind that you're still friends. I just think maybe those late-night calls could slow down a bit. It makes things a little weird sometimes." Her expression changed instantly. Smile gone, jaw tight. "We don't even talk that much." "I know," I said. "I'm not saying you can't talk. She cut me off. "Rowan, you can't ask me to start editing my life. Julian's been my friend since before you. He's part of who I am. I'm not asking you to erase him," I said, keeping my tone level. "Just maybe set some limits." She sighed and leaned back. "That's the problem. You talk about limits like love is a job with office hours. You're trying to erase people from my life because they don't fit your comfort zone." That one hit harder than I expected. I wasn't angry, just tired. "That's not what I'm doing," I said. "I just want us to have space that's ours." She shrugged. "Our space includes my friends. Always has." I didn't say anything after that. We watched the rest of the show in silence. She laughed at something on her phone. I just stared at the TV, not really seeing it. When she went to bed, I stayed in the living room for a while. My laptop was open, but I wasn't working. I opened a blank document and started typing, not for anyone else, just to sort my thoughts. I wrote about how I felt small at her parents' table, how every word I said seemed to turn into a case study. I wrote about the story of her and Julian, about the way my mom said love shouldn't make me feel unreasonable. Then I wrote a question I didn't want to ask out loud. If someone keeps telling you your boundaries are fear, does that mean you're wrong? Or just with the wrong person? I sat there staring at it, not sure if I wanted an answer. When I finally went to bed, Elena was asleep, one arm stretched across my side of the mattress. Somewhere in that quiet, I realized I'd started writing notes about my relationship the same way I did with my building plans, just trying to see where the structure might fail before it actually did. Planning the engagement party started out simple. A backyard get-together, a few close friends, something low-key. That was the plan. Within a week, it turned into a full-blown production. Elena and her mom had a color palette, a catering list, and a layout before I even saw the first email. I kept telling myself it wasn't worth fighting over. I was busy with a project deadline anyway, and they seemed happy handling it. Still, every time I asked about something, I'd get the same answer. "We already handled that." The first planning meeting I actually attended was at the Quinn's house. Evelyn had printed schedules and checklists. Elena was bouncing between her laptop and her phone, showing her mom table settings. They talked fast, finishing each other's sentences like they'd rehearsed. I mostly sat at the end of the table with a coffee, nodding when they glanced my way. "Rowan, what do you think about the floral arrangement?" Evelyn asked suddenly. I looked up from the spreadsheet she'd printed. Looks nice." "Which one?" she pressed. Elena laughed. "Mom, don't interrogate him. He doesn't care about flowers." Then she turned to me. "Do you?" I smiled. "I care that you care." They both liked that answer. It got me out of more questions, which was good, but it also made me realize how little input I actually had. Later, when we went over the guest list, I saw Julian Cross listed halfway down, right between her cousins and her college roommate. My stomach tightened. "You invited Julian?" Elena didn't even look up. "Of course. He's part of my circle. He knows a lot of them." I paused, careful with my tone. Do you think it's a good idea for him to be there? It might make things awkward. She looked up then, like she couldn't believe what I'd said. Awkward for who? Rowan, you have to stop seeing him as competition. He's a friend. He's kind. Why are you threatened by kindness? I didn't answer right away. It's not about being threatened. It's about boundaries. She sighed. Boundaries again. You sound like my dad. That ended the conversation. She went back to the laptop, and I sat there pretending to check messages on my phone. Over the next few days, things moved fast. Invitations went out, decorations were ordered, and Evelyn updated a shared document every night. My name was on the spreadsheet, but I never added a single thing. A few days before the event, I drove to my parents' house. I hadn't seen them in a while, and I needed to get away from the constant planning. My mom was in the kitchen when I got there, chopping vegetables, the radio playing quietly in the background. Hey, stranger, she said, smiling. Big planner now? I laughed. Not really. More like background decoration. She raised an eyebrow. That bad? I shrugged and leaned on the counter. They've got their system. I'm trying not to get in the way. She kept slicing, then said softly, Ask yourself if you feel heard in all of this. I didn't know what to say. She didn't mean it like a lecture. It was just her way. Simple, direct. She finished the vegetables, handed me a plate, and said, You can't build anything sturdy if one side keeps deciding the angles. That stuck with me on the drive home. The night before the party, the house was quiet. Elena was in the living room, phone on speaker, laughing while scrolling through something. I didn't think much of it until I heard a familiar voice. Julian. He was telling some story about an old trip they took with friends years ago. Remember that hotel in Chicago? The one with the broken heater? Elena laughed so hard she nearly dropped the phone. How could I forget? You almost burned the place down trying to fix it. They kept laughing, and I could hear that comfortable rhythm in their voices, the kind you only have with someone who's seen too much of your life. I sat on the bed, staring at the half-packed boxes for the event, listening without meaning to. I wasn't jealous. It just made me realize how easily she fit into that old version of herself when she talked to him, like I wasn't even part of that world. When she finally hung up, she came into the bedroom smiling. Sorry, that was Julian. He wanted to double-check his speech for tomorrow. Speech? I repeated. Yeah, she said casually, taking off her earrings. He's saying a few words at the party. He introduced me to most of our group, so it makes sense. I didn't argue. I just nodded, pretending that sounded normal. After she fell asleep, I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. The shadows from the streetlights made patterns on the wall, lines that didn't connect. I got out of bed, walked to my desk, and opened the small ring box sitting there. The gold caught the light, faint and steady. I lifted the ring from the box and set it on the table. I didn't feel angry, just still. The kind of stillness you get right before something gives way. The engagement party looked more like a small wedding than a casual get-together. The Quinns had turned their backyard into a glowing maze of lights, white tents, and matching centerpieces. I didn't recognize half the guests. A photographer moved around snapping pictures, and there was a long table covered with food I hadn't even known we ordered. When Elena saw me walk in, she smiled like everything was perfect. She looked incredible. Hair up, silver dress, completely in control. I noticed how her parents hovered around her, making sure every detail matched their plan. It was their show, and I was there to play the groom. My parents arrived a little later. Mom wore a simple blue dress. Dad had his usual half smile that meant he was being polite, but ready to leave if things went sideways. They shook hands with the Quinns, exchanged small talk, and found a spot near the front table. That's when I saw Julian. He was in the middle of a group, laughing like he'd known everyone his whole life. When he saw Elena, he walked over and hugged her, longer than what you'd expect at someone's engagement party. He still called her Eli, a nickname I'd only heard him use. She laughed, told him he looked great, and fixed the collar of his jacket like it was second nature. I stood beside them, smiling because that's what you do. He turned to me with a grin. Rowan, man, congrats. You've got yourself a legend here. Thanks, I said. She keeps things interesting. The night went on like that. People talking, taking pictures, laughing too loud. I moved through it all quietly, shaking hands, thanking guests, trying not to look like I was counting minutes. When it was time for speeches, Evelyn took the microphone first. She thanked everyone for celebrating love in all its forms. Then she handed it off to one of Elena's friends, who said something harmless and sweet. After that, Julian stepped forward. I knew he'd be speaking, but I didn't expect what came next. He smiled at Elena before he started, that familiar grin that looked too personal to be friendly. I've known Elena for years, he began. We've been through every version of each other. Students, co-workers, partners in chaos. We even almost moved in together once, but fate had other plans. The crowd laughed. I saw my mom's face tighten slightly. Julian went on. Watching her find someone who appreciates her energy has been great. Rowan, you're a lucky man. He ended by raising his glass of sparkling water, saying, "Here's to love that never really ends. It just changes shape." Everyone clapped again, awkward but polite. I glanced at Elena, who looked proud, not embarrassed. When Julian stepped away, my mother leaned toward Elena and spoke quietly. "It's a lovely evening, dear, but maybe keeping Julian so close in the spotlight could confuse people. Some might not understand." Before Elena could reply, Evelyn turned to my mother with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We don't believe in shutting people out when there's love and care, Lillian. It's an evolved way to live." My mom nodded gently. "Of course. I just meant for appearances." Elena stepped closer, her tone suddenly sharper. "Why should we worry about appearances? Julian is family. He's been there long before wedding plans and labels." The space around us quieted. Guests nearby pretended to keep talking, but everyone could hear her. I tried to step in before it turned into a scene. "Elena, it's not about appearances. Mom just means it might send a mixed message." She turned toward me, eyes bright but cold. "Mixed message to who? You?" "Rowan, you keep treating this like a problem. Julian is part of my life. That isn't up for debate. And if you want to be in my life, you have to be okay with all of it. I'm not trimming people to fit anyone's comfort." And I could feel my parents watching, trying to stay composed. Marcus and Evelyn stood behind Elena, proud, like this was a teaching moment. Julian looked down. Maybe it was my imagination, but he seemed to be enjoying it. I asked quietly, "So you're saying it's all one package?" She nodded, chin high. "Yes, that's what love looks like. Accepting all of it." I took a small breath, nodded once. "Then nah, I'll pass." The words came out calm, steady. I wasn't angry, just done. The crowd froze. Even the music stopped mid-song. For a second, no one moved. Elena blinked, unsure if she heard right. "What?" "I mean it," I said, keeping my voice even. "If this is how it has to be, then it's not for me." I turned to my parents. "Mom, Dad, I think we should go." My mother stood immediately. My father followed without a word. Elena took a step forward. "You can't just walk out. This isn't—" I didn't let her finish. "You made it clear what you want, and I'm listening." Then I turned toward Marcus and Evelyn. "Thank you for hosting." Everything looked beautiful. No one said anything. I could hear the faint buzz of the lights overhead and someone's nervous cough. I walked past Julian, who looked suddenly unsure of himself. He opened his mouth, maybe to say something clever, but nothing came out. At the edge of the yard, I looked back once. Elena stood in the middle of the lights, surrounded by her parents and a crowd of guests who didn't know where to look. I didn't say another word. We stepped through the gate, and the noise of the party faded behind us. Sometime during the speeches, a light drizzle started. By the time we reached the curb, it had settled into real rain. The drive home was silent, except for the steady hum of the tires and the wipers scraping against the windshield. My dad kept both hands on the wheel, eyes fixed straight ahead. The highway was empty, just lines of headlights cutting through the dark. My mom sat beside him with her hands folded, glancing back at me now and then like she wanted to speak but decided against it. Halfway home, my dad finally said, "You did the right thing." I didn't answer. He nodded anyway, like that was enough. A few minutes later, he added quietly, "We're proud of you, son." My mom reached back and touched my hand once. That was all either of them said. When we pulled into my driveway, the porch light was still on, shining over the door like nothing had changed. My dad put the car in park. "Get some rest," he said. My mom turned to me before they left. "You'll feel lighter soon." I watched their car disappear down the street before going inside. My phone was lit up on the counter. Dozens of notifications stacked one after another. The first few were from Elena. "You walked out? Really? We can talk about this. Just call me." Then they turned sharper. "You're overreacting. You embarrassed me." By the 10th message, her tone shifted again. "Please." I didn't mean it like that. I was just angry. "We can fix this." Next came Marcus. His messages read like therapy notes. "Rowan, conflict is an opportunity for growth. Let's discuss this rationally before permanent damage is done." And finally, Julian. "Man, don't blow this up over ego. You're reading too much into it." That one actually made me laugh, quietly to myself. He really thought I'd take advice from him. I turned the phone face down and sat at the kitchen table for a few minutes. Then I opened my laptop and searched for the number of our event planner, Cynthia. She answered on the second ring. "Rowan, perfect timing. We're just about to finalize the vendor confirmations for..." Stop everything, I said, keeping my voice even. Sorry? The wedding is off, I said. Completely. Please don't send out any more emails or calls. Nothing else goes forward. There was a pause on the line. I see. Do you want me to reach out to Elena and her parents? Yes, I said. They were covering the costs. They can handle all the financial details directly. I'll send you their contact numbers. She hesitated again. All right, I'll start the cancellations in the morning. Thank you, Cynthia, I said, and hung up. That was it. No speech, no drama, just one call, and months of planning disappeared. The next morning, I woke up to a new wave of messages. Elena's parents must have found out because the tone changed fast. Marcus left a voicemail that started calm and ended in anger. Do you know how much money we've already spent? This is legally binding in some capacity, you know. You can't just walk away from commitments like this. I called him back once. Marcus, I said, she made a condition for our marriage. I accepted that it wasn't something I could live with. That's not breaking anything. It's respecting what she asked for. He started talking about contracts and promises, but I ended the call before he finished. Around noon, Elena showed up at my house. She didn't knock right away, just stood on the porch, staring through the glass. I opened the door, and she stepped in without waiting. Her makeup was smeared, eyes red, voice shaking. Rowan, please. We need to talk. Go ahead, I said, staying by the doorway. She took a deep breath. I was upset, okay? I said things I shouldn't have. You know how my parents are. I just got caught up. You were clear, I said. You told me exactly what you wanted. I believed you. She frowned, stepping closer. You're twisting it. I didn't mean it as an ultimatum. Yes, you did. Her voice rose. So what? You're really throwing everything away because I won't cut someone out of my life? No, I said, still calm. I'm walking away because you made me choose between respecting myself and keeping peace with you. That's not love. She blinked, tears falling now. I love you, she said quietly. You can't just erase that. I nodded. I'm not erasing anything. I'm ending what doesn't work. She followed me into the living room. The boxes I'd packed that morning were stacked near the couch. Her clothes, books, and the things she'd left around the house. Her eyes widened. You packed my stuff. I figured it would make this easier, I said. You can have your parents come help move it. Her voice cracked. You're serious. I am. For a second, she just stood there, like her body didn't know what to do. Then she grabbed one of the boxes, set it down again, and whispered, You'll regret this. I didn't answer. She left a few minutes later without looking back. I texted her a 2-hour pickup window for the next day and left the boxes by the front door. Her parents confirmed they'd come by. I'd be home to hand everything over. After her parents collected the boxes the next afternoon, I called a locksmith. He changed the locks that evening. When he drove away, I made coffee, sat on the floor, and watched the light come through the windows. The house was completely quiet. No phone buzzing, no background voices, no one filling the space with constant noise. I didn't feel relief exactly. It was something different. Stillness. For the first time in a long while, the walls around me felt like they belonged to me again. On the week after Elena left, I buried myself in work. My firm had just won a bid to restore an old downtown theater. Crumbling, covered in dust, but still standing. My boss told me I'd lead the project. I said yes without thinking. I needed something to rebuild. The place was chaos at first. Permits delayed, crews arguing, budgets changing daily. Still, beneath the ruin, I saw strength in the arches and beams. The building wasn't gone. It just needed someone who refused to quit. A month in, my friend Callie called. You disappeared, she said. I laughed for the first time in weeks. We met for lunch, and after catching up, she told me, You look like yourself again. Work picked up. Harris, the structural engineer, told me, This place has good bones. One stormy night, a support beam snapped and the scaffolding collapsed. No one was hurt. Harris said, You can walk away. I shook my head. It's still worth saving. We rebuilt. Every morning before sunrise, I checked every joint, every line. A local reporter came by, asking why I cared so much. I told her, Sometimes things that look broken just need the right kind of attention. The article, Architect Brings Life Back to Forgotten Theater, hung in the office a week later. That's when I met Maya, the lighting designer. She'd run her hand over the walls and say, These old places have stories. One day she asked why I worked so hard. I told her, Just fixing what's left. She smiled. For the first time in a long while, I realized I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost, only about what I was building. One afternoon, she asked me, So what's your story, Rowan? You don't talk about yourself much. I told her, Nothing exciting. Mostly trying to make things hold. She smiled. That's something. We grabbed coffee once, mostly to talk dimmers and sightlines. She was kind, and we laughed easily, but we both kept it professional. She stayed on the project. I kept my head down. Whatever was possible could wait for someone else's job site. A few weeks later, things escalated outside the job site. I started getting calls from unknown numbers. At first, I ignored them, but one night, after leaving the theater late, I picked up. It was Evelyn. Her voice was colder than I remembered. You should know your little stunt cost this family more than money, she said. Marcus's reputation has taken a hit. People talk. I didn't do anything, I said. You all chose how to handle it. You humiliated my daughter. She gave an ultimatum in front of 50 people, I replied. I just agreed with her terms. She went quiet for a few seconds before hanging up. 2 days later, a coworker showed me something on her phone. A post was circulating online, a blog claiming I'd emotionally manipulated Elena and abandoned her after exploiting her family's generosity. It didn't name me directly, but it was obvious who wrote it. I didn't respond publicly. Instead, I sent a short message to Marcus. You might want to ask your daughter to stop defaming people online. I've kept quiet out of respect. Don't push it. He never replied. The post vanished within 24 hours. Over the next few weeks, old clients started resurfacing. Nothing dramatic, just quiet emails and secondhand stories about blurred boundaries during Marcus's kitchen table consults. He was semi-retired, but still took on referrals, and a few speaking invites were quietly pulled. The Quinns had also stretched for that house years ago. Hosting had become part identity, part expense. Between the reputational scuff and rising costs, they decided to downsize. Marcus stopped taking consults for a while and called it a reset. After that, I decided to take a break. I booked a flight to Prague for a week. The city's architecture had always fascinated me. I spent my days walking through cobblestone streets, sketching cathedrals, listening to street musicians. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. When I came back, the theater was nearly finished. The grand chandelier was being reassembled piece by piece. The crew had signed the back of the stage wall before repainting it. Names, dates, little messages. Harris handed me a marker and said, "You should add yours." I wrote, "Rebuilt, not replaced." The grand reopening drew more attention than expected. City officials came, along with reporters and community leaders. I stood on the stage that night, lights pouring down, looking out at a crowd that was clapping for something that almost didn't survive. After the ceremony, Harris clapped me on the shoulder. "You kept it standing," he said. "Didn't think you had it in you." I smiled. Neither did I. In the following weeks, I started getting new offers. Projects, collaborations, even a speaking invitation for a conference. My name, once just another in a list of architects, was suddenly at the top. Every now and then, I'd hear updates through friends. The Quinns had downsized, Marcus stopped the occasional consulting, and Julian moved overseas. I didn't celebrate their downfall, but I couldn't ignore the irony either. The people who told me I feared change were the ones who couldn't handle consequences. But a full year had passed since the night I walked out of the Quinns' backyard. The world hadn't stopped spinning, and neither had I. The theater project had opened to praise. My work schedule was steady, and my name had started showing up in places it never had before. But what mattered most was that my life finally felt normal again. Quiet, balanced, mine. That evening, I was getting ready for the annual city fundraiser for arts and preservation. It wasn't a big deal, but it felt symbolic. My first public event since the theater's success. I'd been invited as one of the project leads. Nadia Sorrell was coming with me. We'd met months earlier at a small exhibition where she'd been volunteering as a medical coordinator for an outreach program. She was a doctor, calm but direct, the kind of person who could walk into chaos and fix it without raising her voice. From the beginning, being around her felt easy. No tension, no guessing. When she arrived that night, she stood in my doorway, smiling. "You clean up better than I expected," she said, adjusting the sleeve of her dress. "Thanks," I said. "You make me look like I have taste." She laughed. "That's the goal." We drove to the event together, talking about nothing heavy. Her clinic, my next project, how her neighbor's dog had figured out how to open doors. Simple things. The kind of conversation that didn't drain you. The fundraiser was held in a restored museum hall downtown. Warm lights, music playing low, people moving from display to display. The walls were lined with photographs of recent preservation projects, schools, bridges, the old theater. Seeing it there made me pause. It was strange to look at something that had once been a mess of dust and cracked walls and realize it was now part of the city's pride. Nadia nudged me. "You're in at least 3 of these photos," she said. Unavoidable hazard of working, I said. You mean rebuilding half the city? She teased. Before I could answer, someone from the department came over to introduce me to a council member. I spent a few minutes answering polite questions about budgets and permits, the kind of small talk that doesn't mean much but keeps the evening moving. Nadia handled herself easily, jumping into the conversation when it turned to healthcare funding. We didn't have to perform as a couple. We just fit naturally into the space together. After a while, she leaned closer and said, "Want to get some air?" We stepped outside to the balcony that overlooked the square. The city lights spread out below, the air cool and clean. She rested her arms on the railing and said, "You like things you can fix, don't you?" I smiled. "You noticed." She turned toward me. "Just make sure you remember to enjoy the things that don't need fixing." I nodded. "I'm learning." We went back inside after a few minutes. That's when I saw her. Across the hall, near the service entrance, Elena Quinn was standing by a display table in a plain black uniform, adjusting some brochures. It took a second for me to be sure, but it was her. Her hair was shorter, her posture smaller somehow. She didn't see me right away. I watched her for a moment, nothing spiteful, just recognition. A year ago, she'd stood under lights in a glittering dress, surrounded by people who hung on her every word. Now she was quietly working behind the scenes, unnoticed. Then she looked up and froze. Her eyes found mine instantly. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. The noise of the crowd seemed to drop away. There was no anger in her face, no smugness, just a look that said she remembered everything. I gave her a small nod. Not forgiveness, not pity, just acknowledgement. She blinked, managed a faint, polite smile, then turned back to her work. That was it. No words, no scene. Nadia noticed the moment but didn't ask. She just slipped her hand into mine, a simple gesture that grounded me again. "Ready to go soon?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Let's get out of here." We stopped by the exit to thank the organizers. One of them handed me a small envelope, a token of appreciation for my contribution to the preservation program. Inside was a handwritten note that said, "Thank you for proving that restoration isn't just about buildings." Outside, the night was clear. The streetlights stretched in long lines down the avenue, the city humming softly around us. Nadia walked beside me, heels clicking against the pavement. "So," she said, "what's next for you, architect?" "Maybe something small," I said. "I'm tired of fixing broken things." She smiled. "That's good. You deserve simple for a while." We passed a small cafe on the corner that was still open. She pointed at it. "Coffee?" I nodded. "Yeah, why not?" As we crossed the street, I glanced back once at the museum's glowing windows. Inside, people were still laughing, talking, moving on with their lives. Somewhere in there, Elena was packing up brochures, probably glad no one had noticed her. For the first time, I realized I didn't feel bitterness or victory, just peace. Things had settled exactly how they were meant to. Nadia turned toward me as we walked. "You're quiet," she said. "Just thinking," I replied. "About what?" I smiled. "About how good it feels not to be thinking about the past." She laughed softly, bumping my shoulder. "Keep it that way." We walked under the streetlights, the sound of the city fading behind us. No heavy words, no memories pulling at me, just plans for a normal weekend, maybe a quiet morning, and a life that finally felt like it fit. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way.